Hi, everyone. I hope you're staying safe and healthy during these difficult times. My name is Drew Atherton. I'm a pitcher for the Cal Poly Pomona baseball team, and I'm here to talk about why it's important to vote and why voting is something to be proud of. Voter apathy, or the lack of interest in participating in elections, is something that occurs in almost every election cycle. In 2016, 4 out of 10 Americans who were eligible to vote did not vote. Voting is an essential building block for our democracy. People may argue that your one vote doesn't matter, which may be true in the case that it might not sway the results of an election. But by voting, you help bring to light issues that you and your fellow citizens care about. It gives average people the power to choose who we want acting on our behalf. It gives people a voice to be heard. This voice is something every American should be proud of. There are countries in the world where the only method of bringing about change is through revolts, violence, or in worst case scenarios, war. But in America, it is our votes that can dictate the path of our country. Therefore, it's not just important that we vote, but I urge all the eligible voters out there to be proud that they voted.
Okay, hi, I'm Imani Williams. I'm on the women's track and field team at CPP, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about women's suffrage. So the women's suffrage movement was created to basically fight against the oppression that women were currently facing at the time. They're specifically fighting, to be equal to men, to be seen as equal to men, but also specifically for the right to vote. So after decades of protests and failed legislation, they actually had a huge victory when the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920, where they gained the right to vote, and that amendment basically stated that no state could deny a citizen the right to vote on the basis of sex. And so this whole entire movement was extremely influential in U.S. history, and it is also seen as like a turning point in gender equality in our country. But what some people don't know about the movement is that it actually kind of turned a blind eye to racism, and while white women were now given a clear path to vote, Black women and other women of color still were being barred from exercising that right. And so states did this by creating discriminatory voting practices like poll taxes, literary tests that you had to take before you were able to vote. And this was clearly made to keep people of color and minority groups from actually voting. And so in response to this, Black women's suffrage leaders like Mary Church Terrell, Nancy Burroughs, they led a new suffrage campaign where they wanted to show that they deserved the same exact rights that white women were just granted. And so after 45 years of fighting, it wasn't until 1965 when the Voting Rights Act was passed where all women of color were now truly able to exercise their right to vote. And so I mentioned all of this to kind of just emphasize how important it is that we do vote and how powerful it can really be. Because a lot of opposing groups have and are still fighting against people to vote, whether it be because of their race, because of their gender, because they even have opposing views. And so it just shows how they know how big of a difference that we can make. And so I know that a lot of us don't have a huge platform to speak our opinions and, voice everything that we're thinking, but the most proactive way that we can do that right now is by voting. So please use all the information you got today from the meeting and go register to vote.
Hi, my name is Jasper Winslow, and I'm an incoming freshman on the soccer team here at Cal Poly. And today I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about first-time voting. As a first-time voter myself, I understand that beginning the process can be a little overwhelming, whether it's figuring out how to register or trying to decipher complicated ballots and propositions. We're here to guide you. I know one of the biggest challenges facing first-time voters is a lack of resources regarding what will be on the ballot and how that affects you. Even this year, although many of you will have already made up your mind on who you will support in the presidential election, there are other measures that will be on the California ballot you cast that could greatly affect your communities. Propositions involving public school funding, stem cell research, and rent control will all be on this year's ballot in California, yet I know that many of us haven't heard anything about it. Throughout these workshops, we want to provide you with the resources you need to be able to make confident and informed decisions at the polls. Whether it be websites or local grassroots organizations, we want to illustrate that there is no shortage of information or ways to get involved at your disposal in the world today. Another issue I often see in my peers, and something I've felt myself at times, is a sense of complacency or skepticism regarding voting. I hear questions such as, does my vote even matter, or why should I vote? And questions like these are reasonable to ask, and I've asked them myself, but these sentiments left unchecked can be extremely damaging to our democracy. First-time voters and young voters in general make up an increasingly large percentage of eligible voters in the United States, and they have the potential to sway elections all the way up to a national level. However, these groups have continued to produce disappointingly low turnouts at the polls. In 2014, less than 20% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 29 exercised their right to vote. That's millions of votes gone missing that have the potential to shape local policy or even the course of the nation as a whole for the next 4 years. Knowing us young folk in America have the power to enact so much change should be proof alone that your vote really does matter. So take the time now to register and take steps towards being a first-time voter if you haven't already. And don't just stop there. We're all athletes here, so I know you've had a coach or a mentor at some point who's spoken to you about building great habits, and this is no different. As a first-time voter, you want to be building great voting habits, such as staying informed on what will be on your ballots, knowing where your local polling places are, and ultimately exercising your right to vote at every opportunity possible. Remember, this may be your first time voting, but we want to build these habits so that it isn't your last.
Hi, my name is William Shavern. I play basketball at Cal Poly Pomona for the men's team, and I was asked to talk about Black suffrage. Black suffrage refers to Black people's right to vote. Slavery is not abolished until the Black man has the ballot. Frederick Douglass said this in May 1865. It was not until the 15th Amendment was passed in 1869 that Black men were allowed to vote. Even with that amendment being passed, the Black voter faced obstacles like poll taxes, literacy tests, and other measurements to keep them from exercising their voting right. This continued all the way until the 24th Amendment in 1964, which eliminated the poll tax, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which ended Jim Crow laws. Fast forward to 2020, and people are deciding not to vote simply because they think it is not important. Their vote doesn't matter, and it has no effect on their life. If your vote did not matter, then President Obama would not have been the first Black president to run for 2 terms in a row. Black Americans still encounter systemic barriers to equally exercise their voting rights today. For example, a voting rights activist named Latasha Brown said she waited 3 hours to vote at her polling station in South Atlanta. The scene there, she said, was far different from the primarily white polling station on the northern side of her city, when she went to meet somebody there after to go vote. This is just one example set in place for Black voters to be less encouraged to go out and vote. Answer this question for me. If voting was not important and had no effect on you, why did they put all these obstacles up in order to keep you from voting? Thank you.